Thank you so much for joining with me. We are picking up our reading in Journey Through the Text of A Course in Miracles by Dr. Ken Wapnick, PhD. And this is Chapter 7, The Gift of the Kingdom. Picking up our reading in the ego sphere of the atonement. The Holy Spirit teaches you to use what the ego has made, to teach the opposite of what the ego has learned. The kind of learning is as irrelevant as is the particular ability that was applied to the learning. All you need to do is make the effort to learn, for the Holy Spirit has a unified goal for the effort. If different abilities are applied long enough to one goal, the abilities themselves become unified. This is because they are channelized in one direction or in one way. Ultimately, then, they all contribute to one result, and by doing so, their similarity rather than their differences is emphasized. Once more, Jesus reminds us that he takes what we have incorrectly learned, the decision-making mind's power to miscreate, and gently teaches us another use for it. He translates our special relationships into holy ones by accepting our mind's willingness to accept his love. Thus, the simplicity of his single goal of forgiveness, which unites the desperate meanings the world has assigned to bodies, relationships, and events. Despite the ego's attempts to confuse us by presenting us with a myriad number of choices in a myriad number of situations, Jesus helps us recognize the one mistake, projection, and the one correction, extension, to which we now return. The ego's use of projection must be fully understood before the inevitable association between projection and anger can be finally undone. The ego always tries to preserve conflict. It is very ingenious in devising ways that seem to diminish conflict because it does not want you to find conflict so intolerable that you will insist on giving it up. The ego therefore tries to persuade you that it can free you of conflict, lest you give the ego up and free yourself. The ego's fear is that we will recognize that the mind's conflict between itself and the Holy Spirit is unreal, for he does not fight and it takes two to have a battle. Moreover, while the ego's conflict brings dis-ease and pain, the Holy Spirit's true perception leads only to peace and joy. Cleverly, the ego tries to diminish the seeming magnitude of the conflict between ourselves and God by projecting it, supplying the psychological means to cope with the enemy, now seen to be outside. We then spend our lives trying to overcome the perceived enemy that is the body, ours or that of our families, friends, etc., and the physical laws that govern it. We learn how to manipulate others through guilt, the hallmark of the special love relationship, and justify our anger in the special hate relationship. Incidentally, heads of state are not the only ones who love to have enemies. We all do, for that is how we manage the internal conflict that is born of self-hatred. Using its own warped version of the laws of God, the ego utilizes the power of the mind only to defeat the mind's real purpose. It projects conflict from your mind to other minds in an attempt to persuade you that you have gotten rid of the problem. The ego uses the power of the mind, the decision maker, to choose against its true purpose of choosing the Holy Spirit and returning home. By making guilt real and then projecting it into a body, the ego tells us we are safe and God will not destroy us. We are not told, however, that by making a body, we are still doomed to destruction. By the time we recognize the body's mortality, we have forgotten that it comes from the decision-making mind, having believed the ego's assurances that it would protect us. Recall the passage where the ego tells us we will be safe in the body, yet when we try to question its recommendation for an ally, the ego obliterates the question from our awareness, and that's in Chapter 4, Section 5.4. In addition, the ego has us believe that not only are we not sinful because its home in the mind has disappeared, but that someone else is responsible for the misery we feel. Projection is equated with attack in the ego's thought system. It is not the mind that is the problem, but the body, and it is the body of another that is usually the problem. I will stop there today. Thank you so much for joining with me, and I will see you tomorrow. I love you.